Hey guys, and welcome to another spawner tutorial. I'm going to be making a spider spawner this episode, just like the one I made in my SMP series, but I'm going to be making the no bucket version, which is actually a little bit more involved to make, but obviously you can make it at a much lower tech level. The very first thing you need to do is find one of these roguelike dungeons, and if you go down into the roguelike dungeon, there should be a doorway around somewhere. Let's take a night vision potion and just keep going down the ladder here. Okay, so once you make it down to the first layer of the dungeon, you basically just need to do a little bit of exploring. And these swarm spider spawners, which is what we're looking for, they're actually pretty common. So unless you're really, really unlucky, you're probably going to find several of these in a layer. Once you find one, you need to decide which design you're going to go for, whether it's the bucket version or the non-bucket version. When I say bucket, just anything that can place source blocks of water will do you for this build. So in my SMP series, I was using the liquid, what's it called? Cogs of the machine. Liquid drainer, because that thing works really nicely. You don't have to go all the way up to red steel to move source blocks around. And if you've got one of those, you can basically just build this on any spawner you find. If you want to do the bucketless version, you need to check on your map and make sure you're near some water. So you can actually find these roguelike dungeon entrances quite near to the shoreline. So there's going to be a good chance you're going to find a spawner underneath the water there. We've got some water nearby, but I've actually prepared one of these already, so I can show you the dimensions we're working with and try and explain some of the mechanics we're using as well. So I've got one over here. And the first thing you're always going to have to do, same with any of these spawners, is clear out the space around it so we're getting the maximum amount of spawn space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 blocks space in every cardinal direction from the spawner. And you don't need to leave a too high gap above it because these are such small mobs. They're like a fraction of a block. They're absolutely tiny. So just leaving that one airspace above should be fine. They'll spawn in that space, they'll spawn in this space, and they'll spawn in the one below it as well. So you've got your... if this is the layer where your spawner is, you've got one above it, one below it. You've got to dig out that whole block, and then do one more below it, because this is where the water is going to go. And it's going to start collecting the mobs towards like the center and push them towards the collection point. I kind of explained this in the SMP series, but obviously I'll do it here as well. Spiders are like the worst mob in the world to work with because they don't do what they're told, basically. They will fight water currents, they can track you through walls, and if you're in the wrong place, that means that they will fight the current to try and get at you, even if they can't get at you. They can climb walls, so they'll frequently get stuck. So like if we have a wall along here, sometimes they'll start trying to climb up, and they'll get stuck at the ceiling for some reason. I don't know why. So whenever you're building a spawner with spiders, you need to bear all that in mind. And this is designed as a kind of quick and dirty way of using a combination of water flows and also their AI, the fact that they track you, to drag them underneath all of this structure towards the killing point here. Okay, so let's just do this with buckets to start with so I can show you the flows of this. So we've got, if you take your middle block and you come out 3, and then you kind of go down 1, and just dig out a diagonal on each side. That's probably the quickest and easiest way of doing this. And then dig it underneath this structure. If you want to check that you've got the right shape, the end parts of this kind of triangle shape should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks long. Obviously the whole width of the back of the spawn room, which should be 9 blocks. And then 7 blocks on that side as well. And they should meet up at a diagonal to this center point here. And like I say, this middle bit should be 3 blocks from the wall. If you dig that down, and then you dig it all the way underneath towards the edge of your room is, so this should be like the area you dug out, the 4 block space, right? So 1, too far away, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're going to have your wall here to seal the room in. And and then underneath here you go another 4 blocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're just gonna stop, and this is gonna be like another kind of rectangle that you've dug out. Dig it all the way across, and then you're gonna need to dig down again in the middle, like another little triangle shape. So 3 blocks from where your wall is. Dig down, and then just do diagonally up to the wall again, and this is so that the 2 water flows in the corners will all bunch everything together, and the water flows will all constantly be pushing things towards the middle of the room, and then it'll just keep continuing and going underneath here. Once you've done that, dig another 4 blocks forwards, okay, like this, and then 1 more block forward in the middle, and this should be where the water ends up. So let's test that now, make sure we've got all the water flows correct. So 1 source block in each corner. You should see it all flows towards the middle. All these diagonal flows, even if we're on the edge here, we slowly get pulled towards the middle. Even if for some reason the spiders are fighting it and they end up over here, it all goes towards the middle, drags them under, and they'll end up right here. Okay. So that works, so let's block this off, just so we're not fighting the current while I'm explaining the rest of it. Let's do the access point first. We're going to need a couple of ladders for this, nothing too fancy. So you got, this is the block where they end up. If you just dig out a too long, like so, 2 long by 3 wide space like this, that should be plenty. Basically, the mobs are going to be ending up here. We're going to block that off so they can't get through. And this is like a hopperless version as well. I've obviously gone for the lowest resource version here. When they die, the drop should end up on this block. And so if you stand in the corner like this in AFK, you should be picking up the string through the corner of the block. So you don't need to use hoppers for this. It's just nice if you want to just AFK and stockpile a load of stuff. And, you know, in my SMP, I've got it set up with a loom so I can be weaving while I'm working on it. But yeah, build up this little 3 by 2 space, and then if you just dig straight up, you're probably going to end up back in your dungeon. And of course, our potion wears off. So just ladder that up. You'll have a way in and out, because we're going to need an escape route. So yeah, back to this. We know the water flows work. We've cleared them out. These spiders are only 1 block high, and if we have a too high space like this with the water, they're going to get stuck on all this wall here. They're going to be climbing up instead of going down and trying to get to us. So this is where we start to block things in. So whatever block you want, just fill all of this in. This should be enough of a space for them to get pushed underneath, and they'll get dragged underneath this 1 high block here. Just keep filling it in. Do both sides. In fact, we'll leave this open and we'll do that last. And then it's going to be the same idea here, except that for these blocks, well, let's do these ones first. Block that off. Okay, there we go. So they got a 1 high thing they'll go underneath. The water flows will push them towards that thing there. For these blocks, I like to put spectre glass in, because the mobs can pass through them. It kind of stops them getting stuck here. They'll get pushed through the block, but they don't seem to climb it so much. I don't know whether it's just my imagination, but I was getting fewer blockages when I put these 3 blocks as spectre glass here. And we should more or less be good to go. You're going to need a way out of this room too. So, I mean, just use like carpenter's blocks or ladders or whatever. I'm just doing this for the sake of the tutorial. And then you can more or less just place your water source blocks. It'll all flow underneath. Push them underneath there, don't know if you can see that, and towards the back. So I'm going to close this off. Okay, so we're standing in the collection point. I've just replaced one of those blocks with glass just so I can explain what's going on here. The way that this mob trap actually kills the spiders, it's not all actually on this block here. They kind of die on the way, and this channel has been designed to be long enough to drag them as far away as possible from the spawner and just drown them. Because they're so small, even in quite shallow water, they start to drown. And then all the loot should end up in this block where this little guy here is standing. You see he's slowly dying, taking damage. Yeah. If I stand here, you can see we pick up the loot. So I mean, you could have this as glass. I recommend not, because you want to block off any light from going into the spawner. I just wanted to show what was going on. Just, you're going to have to trust that if you built this correctly and you stand in the corners, you should pick up all of the loot, basically. So that's your functioning spider spawner, but if you want to make the bucketless version of this, right, so we don't have the luxury of just placing water source blocks in the corners. Remember, like I said earlier in the video, you have to make sure you're nearby to some water. If you mark your X and your Y coordinates of your corners here, and then I recommend doing it from the top. If you go back up to the surface and just dig down rather than digging up, because when you dig up, eventually you're going to get to like the dirt layer at the top and bad things will happen. If you have ladders underneath you, the dirt will break all the ladders, you'll fall to your death. So always do it from the top down. But I've kind of pre-dug these ones. So break these, and just happen to be hot springs water, of course. We're going to have all these particle effects, but the same thing sort of happens. The water flows meet together, they push the mobs underneath, and it should work. Just want to show you the way I did this, just in case. So here's our water source over here. If you want to avoid on the particle effects, maybe don't use hot springs. It's just what I had to hand. And the way I kind of did this, right? Oops, sorry, bouncing all over the place. There's our hole there. I basically just went to the edge of the hot springs and just dug out a channel until I got to it. And then the water just flows all the way down. But it's important if you're doing this that you actually block this off with something, because you don't want daylight leaching into your spawner through that hole. I did the same thing over here. The water I dug a channel going lower and lower and lower. Yeah, it took a step down here because it was going too far until I got to that. You should have a lot of vertical space to work with because these spawners are usually pretty deep underground. Let's go... Oops, wrong one. Yeah, we're sealed. Let me just go down there. And here we go. Now, obviously, they are fighting the water streams quite a lot because they're not tracking us because we're in creative. And also because we're not in the correct spot. We just grabbed some string already. But once you get down here, as long as you're in survival mode, they should be tracking you. They should be fighting along with the current to get underneath those blocks and try to get to you. So it's reasonably effective. I think I was getting something like... it was just under a stack every 10 minutes or so when I was testing this. I mean, results may vary. I didn't build like 100 of these and test them all, but the rates are okay, and it's designed to be an AFK farm, so you just basically leave it running, go have lunch or something, and you come back and you got quite a bit of string. So I hope that was useful, guys. Let me know if there's any other spawner tutorials you'd like me to work on. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.